Okay. Hey everybody, I'm Zach Gold. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a professor in the Human Development Department. My research primarily is a mix among disciplines, which is part of the reason why I hope that this session is valuable to you as you teach across departments. My background is in early childhood education while I'm within the human development context. Randy has probably seen some of these slides before, but for those who haven't, hoping that you enjoy what you see and that we're able to have a useful discussion here. Hey, Randy, how are you?
Good. Hey, I won't give out the endings.
That's all right. So my screen share this with you and we'll get started. So this workshop is called Enhancing Student Engagement Using Objects in the Classroom. And I primarily based the content here on materials that were integrated into my new course on early childhood play behavior. I'm a play researcher, and I primarily study how children learn and how their development might benefit for their interaction with objects during block building and other kinds of object manipulated play. And so it was a very interesting opportunity for me in a new class on play behavior to kind of come full circle and allow my research and my teaching background to be integrated into one modality here in the classroom. And I attempted to do that by taking, I guess, a philosophy of let's try to teach university students how children learn through play by having them interact through play and other play-based experiences, and then reflect on that as they would if they were children. So today's workshop will really be a little bit of a synopsis of what I did in the class in order to demonstrate those concepts, and then how we can translate that to adult learning of university age students, and how you might then apply that to courses that are not completely related to, say, early childhood education. So this is a slide I have called Legos and Influenza. And the background with that is that when I was a child, every time I would get the flu, my mom would feel bad and get me a Lego set. So this, I guess on a personal level, when I think back to this is how I became a play doctor. Is my whole room as a kid was filled with shelves of Legos, and I think benefited from that experience a lot in terms of how I made sense of the world and how I understood how pieces fit together, and concepts about math and science and other things were through block building. These cardboard blocks on the left here are probably from the 80s, I would say, and we don't have them anymore, but I wish we still did. Really, object manipulation has its origins in a mix between psychology and education research going back hundreds of years. And Frederick Froebel, who was the founder of kindergarten in Germany, has this great section in his source book called The Education of Man, written in the 1800s. And this is one of the few cases when I teach where I like to read a section for students, because in many ways what he wrote about the way that young children learn, I really think that if you inserted college age student into where it says child, it translates well. So he says, therefore the child, the young human being, must even from his birth be received in accordance with his nature, rightly treated and established in the free all-sided use of his power. The use of some powers and members at the expense of others should not be promoted, nor should the latter be checked in their unfolding. The child should neither be partially chain fettered or swathed, nor later kept in leading strings. And so this section really kind of emphasizes the child-driven approach that we tend to take today in early childhood education. And I really think it speaks to the approach that we try to take at the university level too, of a student-centric approach, really trying to foster learning at the student level. And what's very interesting is that when Froebel created this concept of kindergarten. On the right, you can also see Froebel's gifts, which were kind of an early block building set that he used to demonstrate things like singing and dancing, and even some early botany skills with plant growing. And he had a very hands-on approach to education. And this kind of approach carried over into some of the classic educators that we know, like Montessori, who developed her own education materials. Many of them looked like small block pieces or an object counters that she would line up on a table for kids to understand different mathematical concepts by object manipulation. Patty Smith Hill, who was at Teachers College at Columbia, was a passionate play proponent. She developed these blocks called Patty Smith Hill blocks, rightly named. There's a depiction of them on the right here. I've been trying to get my hands on a vintage set of these forever, and you just can't find them. I don't even know where they would be anymore. But they're almost like early life-size Lincoln logs, where you can see that there's notches here, and the planks can be slid into the grooves in order for children to build full-scale houses and other structures that they could then play inside. And I think her goal was to have kids be able to build something and then pretend and use it afterward. And so it's a really nice way of kind of translating these object concepts into children learning social skills and teamwork out of that. Caroline Pratt was a kind of a contemporary of Hill, and she developed these wooden blocks that we call unit blocks. And you've probably seen these before in nursery schools and other preschool programs. And she called them unit blocks because naturally they were designed to teach mathematical units. Two triangles fit together into a square, and two squares a rectangle, and so on and so forth. And the kids that actually built this was part of my dissertation study about 5 years ago. They called this a factory, and you could see the kind of smokestacks and what looks like a long assembly line version within that structure. And what really interests me about Caroline Pratt is she had this quote about unit blocks being an experiment in cooperation that she perceived as the foundation for social relations and ethics that are democracy. And when I think about what the philosophy is today for the way that college-age students are expected to learn and to contribute to the world, we're really focused on what they can do in teamwork and group work, and a focus on how they can contribute collectively to society. I tend to think a little bit about this new buzzword that gets thrown around, 21st century skills, and you see that a lot in STEM research, where there's an emphasis at the elementary and high school and college level on these skills like leadership and cooperation and critical thinking skills. And this appears in a lot of different pedagogies at different levels. And what's very interesting to me is that all of this stuff has its origins in early childhood education, and I don't find it to be too much different than the kinds of skills we're trying to promote at the college age level. And so my hope with the play course was to take this approach of applying the philosophy of early childhood education to college age education, and the philosophy behind object-based learning in early childhood ed to college ed. And interestingly, I really think that it worked well, and I think that students really enjoyed the process of being able to build like kids and learn like kids, and that got the concepts across pretty well. Piaget is the famous Swiss psychologist who sort of started this real true theory of active manipulation of objects to understand learning processes. And what I want to do is briefly show you some of his basic ideas of conservation of material properties with some objects, and then we can kind of branch out to how that might work with older folks. This idea of conservation is when you change the material properties of something, even though it is the same amount, do children perceive it as the same amount or different? So when you conserve volume, like 2 equal glasses of liquid, by pouring one glass out into a taller, thinner glass, it is the same amount of liquid that was there before, but it's taller and thinner. And kids that are not able to conserve will perceive the taller glass as having more liquid in it. The same thing happens with number. if you take these checkers and spread them out wider, a lot of kids that are not able to conserve will perceive this row as having more checkers in it. Well, you can see that this has 6 and the one below it also has 6, but it looks bigger to kids. And same thing happens with matter. So these are 2 balls of Play-Doh. It's the same amount of Play-Doh in each of these balls. But if I took this one and flattened it like a pancake and it looked like a bigger circle here, kids that would not be able to conserve would perceive this to have more Play-Doh in it, even though they have already seen that the 2 balls are identical in terms of the amount of Play-Doh they have in them. This is kind of a baseline for where we start with object manipulation, is how Piaget perceived kids' intellectual development to occur based on their interaction with objects and their understanding of the experiences in the world. Today, there tends to be this focus on play research as it relates to the developmental domains. So the areas in education and early human development where kids tend to benefit from manipulating objects. And you can see on the bottom here, this is quite a variety of materials. On the right here is a water table, and there's cardboard box that we all love to play with as kids, and even rocks and classic cardboard blocks here. What researchers try to do is that we know that a lot of these domains like language skills and math and social emotional competency and the various cognitive domains, we know that they're all extremely important for school readiness. So kids who have good language and literacy and math skills in preschool are much better prepared to enter formal school, and so on and so forth. And a lot of these domains tend to be very highly related to each other. So when we study early childhood play and object manipulation, there's a lot of scholars trying to connect to these domains and show that they're related in meaningful object manipulation contexts, because we know that those kinds of things tend to facilitate a very high level of engagement and learning when kids are motivated and when they really feel excited to interact with materials. Really get a little bit deeper in the brain. And so my hope with the play class is to kind of translate that a little bit. I really wanted to do this in person, but I'll demonstrate this as well as I can with the graphics. I just want to give you an example of how object manipulation through block play is potentially related to some of these developmental domains. So when you think about mathematics, especially geometry that could be facilitated by blocks, I think about parts, moles, and fractions, shapes, measurement skills. So if the child says that and indicates that through their language, these 2 small triangles can make this big one. Identification of shapes like a semicircle, and also recognizing that one tree might be shorter than the tower that's next to it. These are things that naturally occur during block building and other kinds of manipulative contexts, and it inherently has mathematics in it, even if children don't necessarily recognize that they're actively doing that. Same thing happens with spatial skills. One of the primary measures of spatial skills is mental rotation and the ability to transform objects using your mental representational skills, such as rotating an object or mentally representing what would happen if you took 2 halves of an object and put them together into one. So if a child says, how can I make a circle? And they recognize that there's 2 semicircles, and what you have to do essentially is rotate them and put them together, there's your circle. Same thing here, is it's a real sort of optimal context to facilitate these kinds of skills in early childhood. So how did I translate that into my childhood play behavior course? I really focused on metacognition. I wanted the students in my class to be thinking about their own thoughts, but also thinking about how children think. So I had them manipulate a lot of objects and build a lot in class, and then evaluate their own behavior, and I evaluate the behaviors of other students to try to reflect on those building experiences and what does that teach us about these concepts in early childhood. So I try to boil it down for my students into 2 parts. We need to identify the specific things in the object manipulation and in the play that are important, and then figure out how to facilitate that. And I think the same holds true for using objects in any college class. What are we trying to accomplish? What concept are we trying to get across to students? And then what objects and what kinds of prompts and reflections can we use with those objects in order to facilitate that concept? And I want to briefly talk about that as it relates to material properties of objects. There are lots of course, lots of different avenues that you can go down with how you incorporate blocks and other kinds of manipulatives in the classroom. And those properties offer different things. And it has a lot to do with size and function and application. And a lot of the things that we have at home in our houses can be used to facilitate these concepts, and they're often thrown in the trash. So I like to use paper towel rolls a lot and other things that could represent a cylinder. Here's a tin can that I made less sharp with some duct tape that I use for lots of things in courses. As you can see, I already have some Play-Doh here that I can use for things. But material properties are important to focus on because some materials lend themselves to a little bit more diversity, whereas a lot of times, so for instance, smaller materials, you can be limited in terms of what you could do with them. And one of the main issues, I suppose, with my course is how do I teach a course of 20 or 30 students with materials that are tiny on a desk in the front of the class? So I actually had to get innovative with presenting large, kind of blown up objects in bigger materials in order for the point of view to be seen by students. And material-based learning in early childhood, I mean, you can see that they use PVC pipes and water pumps and all kinds of things that we have in our sheds. And a lot of us as faculty members probably have these materials and can think about ways to incorporate them into our classes. And even though we might not necessarily think about those materials being useful, you don't necessarily need to go out and buy a set of blocks. You've got some spare pieces of wood in the shed, and you can sand them down and use them for different things. Even natural things like sticks are pretty useful and interesting to use. And this person made some ramps and balls here. These we usually refer to in early childhood ed as loose parts play. And loose parts are not just things like paper towel rolls and other sorts of things, but you can even consider things like pine cones and anything that's moving. Rocks are a loose part. Water is technically a loose part. And they really vary in terms of the multisensory aspects and how they interact, I suppose, with the environment. I mean, stained glass is very useful for light concepts, and I suppose that you could apply that to science classes in various ways. Even when you think about engineering in early childhood education, this is something that we typically think of as an adult area, an adult field. And a lot of the research on engineering doesn't really begin until about elementary age, but there's been this recent trend, including in my own work, of trying to understand the concept of engineering among young kids, both in terms of trying to get kids interested in the STEM fields at an earlier age, but also how that potentially relates to these other developmental areas that we were talking about, like math and spatial skills. So, I mean, you can see the kinds of engineering that are inherent in early childhood play in terms of civil engineering and structural and mechanical here with a pulley system, but also you might not think about chemical engineering. When kids mix paint together, that of course is chemical engineering. If I were to take the two dough balls here and mix them up and make another color out of green and purple, that would be a mix of chemicals and chemical engineering. And so it really kind of has diverse applications for demonstrating concepts and within the sciences as well as within the social sciences. I really want to explain to you a problem-solving process that happens in kids' play, because I really think that this is a way of understanding the way that the mind works as children are learning and engaging through a learning process. And then we could branch out and think about how college students might do something similar. So these kids in this problem-solving process are attempting to roll a ball down a ramp, and I believe what they want to do is catch it at the bottom in some kind of bumper or like semicircle to stop the ball from rolling away. And they have to go through this problem-solving process in order to achieve that. These kids are going through a similar process. I always like to show this picture before I go through the problem-solving process, because this is a rubber ramp and a ball can roll down it. And what these kids have done is actually dug a pretty deep hole in a sandbox, and they've made the ramp come back out the other side here. So when they roll the ball down, it disappears under the sand and comes back up. And I've seen a video of that process of these specific kids, and it's really interesting in terms of the social cooperation, the conversation that they have with each other, the teamwork. in order to be able to figure out exactly how they're going to get that hole dug the right way. And you can see they even have kind of a test hole here. I believe that they've done this as well, because when the ball gets stuck on the bottom underneath, the kids can reach in from the side and retrieve it if it doesn't roll back up. And you can clearly see as well that there's some leaders and followers and observers here as group work roles shift and those dynamics change depending on the collection of students. So the first step in this problem solving process is thinking, really identifying the problem and stating your goals and trying to predict what you're going to do and then making plans in order to accomplish that. And I like to show this teacher a lot because she's trying to facilitate kids thinking here. I show her partly because she's facilitating thinking, but I also like to show her partly because she's an example of someone who I generally think of as a little bit of an over teacher. She leads kids more than I would like her to. And I like to provide examples, not just of exemplars, but also of kind of like do what she's doing, but don't do it a little bit overboard here. So you could see she's facilitating thinking, but I often find when I show this clip that I want her to let the kids start thinking on their own, and I feel like she's thinking for them a little bit.
Here, I saw you build a really great road. So I brought all the ramps in, and I thought maybe this is a bigger room, maybe we could make a bigger road. But it would take all of you working together and thinking together. What do you think? Could we do it?
Yeah.
Could we make a big road? Maybe with some bumps or hills or tall parts or short parts or long parts?
Hairs. Hairs.
Hairs?
No, hairs.
Hills. Hills with hills. Thank you for the interpretation. Hills, okay. All right, well, what do we need to do hills with?
With a tunnel.
A tunnel. Well, let's go look at our materials. Come on, everybody, let's see what we've got going on here. Is there any tunnel?
This one.
This one?
Yeah.
Would you like to use this one?
Yeah.
Okay, back.
And this.
And this one? You think so?
I usually stop this video about here because she sort of leads kids into how she would do it, which is exactly how I wouldn't do it. But I like to show this because she at least prompts the start of their play and to have them thinking about building on a previous experience that they have just accomplished in a recent play session. I find that exactly at this moment, I would say to kids, think about what you did last time and how you could make your roads or intersections and tunnels bigger and better. How would you do it? And then you have them relay that to you. What she does is sort of keep going. But the thinking process starts, and then after that, the problem-solving process becomes ideating. This is when the wondering and the brainstorming and the different possibilities emerge. And what I like to think of this as is kind of here's our multiple blueprints. Here's our options for how to best accomplish this, and then how does that come together? So here's facilitating ideation. This teacher over here is terrific. She does a lot of non-word, but verbal gestures, which I find to be really useful. What they're trying to do is get this water to go through the pipe using the pump, but there's a crack and the water keeps spilling out, and the kids are trying to find a way to not have it spill. And I noticed that she goes, a lot, and to sort of narrate things out for the kids and to get them thinking about their own thoughts.
Well, I think it could cover on this too to go into this one.
Okay, so that's one idea. Go through this long pipe, into the tube, and down the long ramp. Are there any other ideas for how the water should travel today?
Trying to get much better. Maybe we could put more pipes there, and then the water would go through the pipes that were there, and then the pipes that went there went all the way over to there.
So are you saying you'd like to make a long pathway full of pipes?
Yeah.
And is there any way that this tube could work into that long pathway so that many ideas are put together. All right, so I think that maybe some building time.
Okay.
Building time. Is there another idea? Cole?
Like we could put these like that, and then put the tube through here maybe.
Put the tube through there.
Yeah, and then the water would flow through the tube and go to the rest of the pipes.
Okay.
But if the pipes went through,
Okay, that,
So I think there's actually an extended version of this where the other teacher starts going, but what I like here is she starts the thinking process and then she allows the kids to finish the idea and to really talk it out themselves. And I always find that's a useful strategy in the classroom as well during group work, is to allow my students to sort of lead the discussion and take it where they'd like to go. After the thinking and the ideating is the making process, where they create things and test stuff out and trial and error, and then becomes improving, where based on the testing out experience, additions and refinements are made in order to expand thinking and kind of come to some sort of improved resolution. I'm going to show some pictures of this process rather than these extended films that go on forever, but this is the process of them actually trying to roll this ball down the ramp and then improving, stopping the ball. So you can see that the thinking has happened and they've rolled the ball, and what's going to happen is it hits this ramp and falls off on the floor, and then they've got to make improvements. So they're trying it out and they're ideating, they're making it, and then they're recognizing, well, it's gonna fall off this ramp right about when it hits here. So why don't we create these collection capsules down here for the balls to fall in and stop. And then they've recognized that depending on how fast they roll the ball, it might land in circle number 1, it might land in circle 2 or circle 3. So we'll just have a little line of them depending on where it lands. Still improving, still making it better. Improving continues. I think they're starting to add some additional components here, including taking the toy box and putting it up on its side as kind of a backstop. Now, how did I use this in my play class for adults? This is one example of kind of the large play materials that I use. This is it has a specific name. It's called Rigamajig, but it generally what it is a life-size erector set with large hand screws and other kinds of materials. And I had asked my students to make an aquarium. How do they mentally represent that and think about making an aquarium? And so what they built here was essentially the bottom part of the square fish tank. This here is supposed to be a fish. You could see the body of the fish on the left with a little bit of a tail. And I think back here, these two girls are fishing. They even made a fishing rod here with a hook on the end of it. And later on, what I actually did was have another group of students come in, and I intentionally did not have them take notes when they were observing these students making the aquarium. And later on, I said, remember as much about the previous aquarium as you could and try to replicate it, just to see if they could remember what they saw and bring it back and replicate it, as I would have kids do that. And then I actually said, well, what things can you do to it to potentially make it better than the other group made it? And they sort of had a little bit of an improved version of it. For the final course project in the class, what I had students do was create play-based lesson plans for early childhood and then implement those lesson plans with each other using various materials from my research lab. So this student was using fruit counters. So these are a common early childhood tool used for early math skills, counting and ordering and putting things in various sequences. And she had them make a construction site where they were taking the fruits and sorting them out by shape and size and into different bins for the construction workers to go and get, almost like they would at a stone quarry. This was a really fun one where Woody was trapped on the top of a volcano, and you had to imagine that you were going to walk across the planks on the floor without walking through lava to go up and rescue Woody. And there's a lot of spatial visualization skills there, because the students had to select a path to cross the planks on where they would not end up bumping into obstacles or walking on the lava. And I think the student actually called it "the floor is lava," so it's very relevant to games that kids would play today. This was something really intriguing. I'm a little bit of a hoarder when it comes to objects. I save chopsticks every time I get sushi, even though I'm incapable of using them, just because I keep thinking that they'd be useful for something in my lab, and I finally found a finally found a use for it after all this time. Um, I had a student try to teach persistence skills by having students stack the fruit counters using the chopsticks, and which also clearly involves some fine motor ability. It was really difficult because you had to think about which fruit are going to stack up on top of each other and how high can you get it. It almost became a little bit like a Jenga game to be able to lift the fruit counter with the chopsticks, put it on, and it's I tried it out and it reminded me a lot of those little desk doodads where you have to get the golf ball to land on the tee of the snow globe. And when you get it like once every 6 months, you never want to touch it again because you don't want it to fall off. But it was very, very intriguing to see the creativity that students came up with in terms of how to make a lesson plan with various objects. Now, how does this translate to different disciplines and different courses? I teach research methods a lot. I know Randy does as well. And I try to bring in materials to teach some methods concepts whenever I can do it. And what I'm always trying to come up with new ideas and new ways to do this. So I'm interested in any ideas that anybody has. One of the things I do is I make a basic pulley system for an inverse correlation. And I ask students what happens when you pull down on one side, and of course the other side goes up. And rather than just explain a negative correlation as some concept that might bore some students, I actually have students come up and pull on the pulley system to see, oh, okay, well, clearly when one goes up, it is making the other one go down. I have yet to think of some contraption that can replicate a positive correlation, because you're pulling down on one thing, the other thing is going to go up. But I need to get creative and figure out how to do that. Well, of course, you don't necessarily need to access to a pulley system in order to do that. You can make a seesaw out of a basic, any kind of tube, a Pringles container, and any kind of piece of wood. You can make an inverse correlation out of this as well. So these are the kinds of things that I try to accomplish across my courses, is how do I get students out of their seats, up to the front of the classroom, and actually doing something other than just listening to me try to get some concept across to them that they might not be fully interested in about math and stats and other kinds of methods concepts. So I'm interested in what your thoughts are and how you think about object use in different disciplines and different classes. You have any ideas, Randy?
But I think that was interesting. As I was listening to that, listening to you, I like the idea of getting people out of their seats and having a reason to get them engaged in something. And I'm going to try to incorporate some of that. And I also like the idea about problem-solving approach to something, and having people brainstorm together. And I guess as you were thinking about manipulatives and things like that, I was thinking more on the lines of in the research classes, maybe some of the manipulatives are survey tools and things like that people actually, themselves, adult kind of toys. And so, I think with an interesting kind of a way to reframe the stuff that we already do and allow other things to be able to be incorporated now based on a new way to think about it. So
that is really interesting. I guess the independent variable is the manipulative, right? So a survey could be manipulated, and I hadn't thought of that, but I'm glad you brought that up.
I mean, it is like the centerpiece of some things, right? So it's kind of the toy, and working on it together, with the goal of making it better, brainstorming it, what's wrong with it, and kind of,
Sure.
Time doing like that as a way to understand it better,
And I think too that when you think about research design in general, I think because we teach the classic experiment, quasi-experiment, correlation, I think students tend to think about that as the square peg goes in the square hole. But of course, in the real world, when you run a research study, it's never that simple, and you've got to get creative with your designs, and you have to understand what's feasible and what's not. And COVID is a great example of that, in terms of nobody wants to be in a research study right now that involves human interaction and us breathing on each other. So how do you get creative with how you manipulate the study in order to accomplish the data collection? I guess that's something that we all are running into, and how I would teach that in class would, I usually reserve a day in my methods classes just to explain to students about how money drives research studies and grants and the number of people that you have and where you are. We live in a pretty homogeneous region of New York State, unless you go down to Cuse to try to get a diverse sample. And so these are all things to consider. And I suppose you're right that they are all, they're conceptual manipulatives.
Yeah. And, I was thinking, just as you were speaking right now, that sometimes when you're talking about the money end of that, their eyes glaze over, like, who gives a crap? But, I might start my class out with a bunch of money on my desk that you need in order to move your study forward. And without it, you're not going to be able to pass this class. So
you could give me some of the money to put on my desk if you want.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just, like fake funds that you need to come up with an idea that I'm willing to fund.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, how do you only have a limited number of funds. Where's it all going to go to accomplish this?
Yeah. So I was thinking about that from like a problem solving perspective, because research seems to be a problem solving perspective all the time, right? Like, as you were saying, it's like, how do we control for this, and how do we make up for that, and how do we, find the middle of something in the best case scenario?
Yeah, and I find this, of course, this occurs in early childhood education a lot, and I think potentially it happens more and more toward the adult level as well, where people talk a good game about teamwork and cooperation and group work. And then when we find it gets difficult, we say, oh, forget this. If you want something done right, do it yourself. And it doesn't always happen. In early childhood, they talk about the importance of social emotional skills, but that stuff has sort of taken the back burner and put on the back burner, as there's more of a focus on school readiness and direct instruction in these skills for school prep. And really can't underestimate what kinds of processes happen when you run into issues. I mean, there's really interesting research on conflict in adolescence that shows that when social conflict happens, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it creates a situation that requires you to solve it. And you don't learn how to solve it unless the conflict happens.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
and now requiring people to be under those circumstances, I guess, kind of robs them from the opportunities to
exactly.
Exactly.
So like I provide the students in the play class with prompts that I would provide to kids, like, here's a problem with the structure, how are you going to fix it? And I don't designate leaders and followers. You let the social order determine itself, and try to have everybody take a role and do what they can do to contribute. And sometimes the most interesting contributions are the students that stay quiet and observe and have that one golden nugget of information that makes the difference.
Yeah. Cool.
I see you nodding, John. Do you have any thoughts about all this?
No, it sounds interesting. It's nice work.
Thanks.
I just can't believe you made a class out of playing.
It's fun. It's fun. I learned a lot about what I would change as well. So
but I think that's an awesome way to get people to think about how kids develop, right? By putting them in the actual circumstance and have them reflect on what they're doing, and how kids would be doing that too.
It kind of felt like Inception a little bit when I was it was sort of like, I'm going to teach you about how kids are learning by you acting like kids within the same framework, but you're adults thinking like kids and you're thinking like adults. And so it's where's the comes first. And it was fun to think about that.
Wow, well, I really appreciate your presentation.
Thanks for attending. Scott, I see you're there. Do you have any thoughts or reflections?
Oh, I enjoyed it. I thought it was really nice. I worked with, kids, but I was working with middle school kids, so we didn't have as much time to play as if they were in the younger group. But yeah, just having them kind of give them the materials that they have, or have them create their own materials to try to come up with the solution. Say, here's the problem, but they have to come up with what do they need to build or create to solve the problem. You might not have it on you, so that would be nice to have them think outside the box.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it's even just having students suggest what they could use to solve a problem is certainly interesting. I published something a few years ago on how to make your own homemade play materials for parents. And it was a lot of similar things, like go and get a tin can and cover it with duct tape so it's not sharp, and here you have your cylinder and everything like that. And you can fortify a shoebox. But it's interesting to think about that in an adult level too. I mean, we have all these problems in the world that we need to fix. Here's the resources that we have available. What things are, what things in the real world might we use that we don't think about using to solve some sort of issue.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, none of that was an issue because we figured out how to make things out of everything. Right?
Even when I was a kid, which is a lot more recent. My dad used to own a propane gas company, and he would bring us home hot water heater boxes. And I just remember that was the best toy, was the box. My brothers would close me in the box and roll me down the stairs.
Oh.
That's how I became what I am today. A lot of hitting my head on the steps. So
Yeah, can't tell you how many times I cut my hand on a box trying to cut doors and windows and stuff in it.
well, I tend to be a little bit like, I used to carry a pocket knife everywhere, and I don't do it now that I'm on a college campus because
But you need it.
yeah, just for safety's sake. I don't want to be perceived as having a weapon, and for any reason, I use my office key to rip open boxes. Well, thank you for attending. If anyone has any other thoughts.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was really good. I'm
Thanks a
sorry
lot.
we couldn't do this in person this year,
Oh,
but it was
it's all right.
probably a bit safer as things are right now.
All for
Next time.
safety. All right. Thanks for
Okay,
coming.
thank you.
See you around. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.